So how long would we like to focus on this particular topic? And is there any mention, any agreement with the idea of having a deep dive on Friday, Thursday or Friday?
See Doug about the deep dives.
Yeah, both slots are available.
I don't know, but all proposals are good, but Sam has a proposal for us right now he put into the chat. Maybe we could give that some credence before. Would you like to talk about that some more, Sam? Your proposal? Because that's kind of where we were.
Are you talking about my proposal for how we do focus with the when and how?
Yeah, most definitely.
Yeah, I mean, that is part of the reason I wanted to bring these topics up. So I'm post presentation now. I did the 30-second presentation of it. I'm curious whether there's any feedback on it. I mean, Heiner may have given some indirect feedback, but I didn't hear any direct feedback on this yet.
Other than adding a metric, which may or may not be useful.
It's an interesting topic, but unless we actually know how to apply the metric almost in real time, it may take certain parts of our main mental capacity to even do that. So I'm wondering whether it's something we can do in real time.
Well, one of the things that I like to do is if I listen to a paragraph, can I write a bullet note that summarizes the paragraph?
Also, the density should be good when somebody does that. Their explanation should have some information density.
Okay, so I'm going to interject and say, rather than talking about the metric, I'm requesting that we focus now on the specific proposal, which is defining the topic in a one-liner, declaring how it's relevant to GCC/barn raising, and then either assign it because somebody's got the authority to do so, or agree on it at the start of the conversation because we're, in a sense, all gravitating towards that particular focus. That's the when part. The second, which is now in conversation, the how part is, if someone thinks that a monologue is drifting off the mark, indicate it with some sort of short 3 or 4 character, thing in chat. And we could counter, someone else could say, no, it's actually relevant. And here's another 3 or 4 character indication that I think it's on topic. But as long as there's 2 such indicators that it is or it isn't, then the requester is asked to clarify how it's relevant to the original topic. And if that's not doable within 30 seconds, then we agree it's not relevant to the first topic and we move on to the next speaker. That was the proposal.
Well, I second, to be relevant and on topic, I second the proposal because being able to focus is one of the most important things in the barn race, in brainstorming.
Okay, so thank you, Alex. So I think I hear Colin's earlier agreement and your agreement. Is that right?
Yeah, but we haven't got a button to click in the vote, so it's only a general conversation.
Well, under reaction,
not making an agreement.
We could choose to use one of those, reactions that Zoom allows us to do.
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
we'll have to make an agreement on which one we're going to use.
Yes.
Which and what it's going to, whether it's an up or a thumb up or thumb down.
Yes, and we're all going to have to learn the skill of paying attention to those items.
Actually, I don't think there is a thumbs down.
No, but there is something else we could use.
We could use the party pooper hat for thumbs down.
Well, if you click on the ... there's plenty others to choose from also.
Yeah, there's a frowny face or angry face, smileys.
And if you do look further, there are more thumbs down ones as well.
Oh yeah, you can scroll.
Like this one. Do you see mine right now?
Uh-huh.
And the more you use them, they show up in the frequently used up at the top.
Yeah.
So you don't have to scroll down to find ones that you've already been using.
And oh, by the way, if I put that thumbs down, it disappears after 3 or 5 seconds. I just noted.
Right.
Got to keep
Yeah.
your finger right on the button.
They're temporary.
Yeah. So anyway,
Touch the button.
it's just a skeleton. It's a shell of a proposal, and it's designed to be quick, not very expensive, but we would have to sort of, work around it and see if it appears harsh or traumatic to some people.
I guess to me, it sounds like it's feedback. It would be ideal if you could let the person speak, and like you could have like a little heat map indication on the replay where they could go back and see where people were lost and where people thought they were off the mark and not interrupt them, so it's not intrusive.
Yeah, but I'm trying to work with
such a way.
facilities that we have, not
No.
things that we don't have.
I'm dreaming. No. I'm dreaming just for a second, because I think the value is the feedback non-intrusively. Only if it has consent, though, because some people, may be a little more shy. And again, there's also people who are going to speak that aren't really trying to contribute to a project, and therefore are going to have low density. They're going to be talking about small talk, as it were. So, yeah. Thanks, Sam, for the thumbs down.
I was going to wait and see if you actually noticed it. That was an experiment.
Yeah.
It reminded me, I used to jump in after somebody had a dialogue and just disregard everything they said and take the conversation off on a different tangent. I don't know why I used to do that, but it was just a habit, and I've been trying to, modify my behavior so that I listen
Hey,
more
Alex?
deeply. Yeah.
Can I say something right there, Alex? I deeply, deeply appreciate that you just shared that. I really do.
We could use a windy icon, maybe.
No, wait. This is where I actually would prefer that I be allowed 15 seconds to give Alex that deep appreciation for what he just said.
Yeah, go for it, as much as you need.
No, I really mean that, Alex. It's significant to me. That's some self-awareness right there.
Ipsissimus.
Okay, thanks for allowing that time.
It's not artificial intelligence, it's real intelligence making progress.
I like to see human-guided artificial intelligence. I still think the human's the conductor for some things. Maybe not all things, but some things. The things that computers aren't good at.
Don't get me started on that, because that's going to go for several more hours too.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've discussed everything at least twice, I think.
We need some
I disagree.
3D models created.
Yeah.
We're building a 3D reality world with the headsets, and we need some good artists to make.
Okay, so if I'm going to try and focus, I'm going to still say either nobody else has any feedback on the specific focus proposal, or you're all in agreement. So
Yeah,
I'm
the
going to count to
specific thing
3,
is,
and if there's
I think
no
we did.
hard objective, then I'm going to assume everybody agrees, at least among those present here. 1001,
Yeah.
1002, 1003. Wow, you all agree. Okay.
Wait, I changed my mind. Just kidding.
All right.
You're allowed to change
Fast.
your
1,
mind.
2, 3 is for much too fast.
All
You
right.
can't do it in 1, 2, 3. But
There's a 30-second
Tees,
timer.
you have
agreement needs
10
a
more
second.
seconds, Tees. I'm going to count to 10 for Tees. Okay?
No.
All right, 30. I'll count to 30
24
for
hours,
you.
More
Okay,
than
Tees?
24 hours.
We'll call Tees tomorrow.
All right, Tees, you have until this time tomorrow to get back to me on this.
Okay, but I don't know what I'm going to agree on.
It's
Unless-
in the Facebook Messenger barn raising thread.
Okay, yeah, okay, I'll find it.
Okay. All right, so
Taking
I'm
you
not going to
seriously.
belabor you with the disambiguation part, but thank you for letting me do that for focus.
Yes.
Sam, there's a word for that acknowledgement that you just gave Alex, and I learned this word by watching a Netflix series called The Irregulars. When somebody is not only keenly aware, but keenly self-aware, superlatively self-aware individual is a very special kind of individual. And the name of that individual in this series, it's a real word, ipsissimus. That's the word that describes a person who is not only keenly aware, but keenly self-aware.
Fascinating. You know, this possibly is the one area where I do reflect that English is my second language.
That's either Latin or Greek, that word.
I know, but it's working its way into the English, and you introducing it, albeit probably not a popularly used word in English, is still something that I would still have to devote mental cycles to appreciate.
But the word is actually a synonym, and there are other terms. Systems thinking is, a person who's a good systems thinker manifests that ability to be keenly aware of the system, including themselves and their role and their presence and their influence in the system. And it's also in the Kabbalah. It's in the Tree of Life chakra diagram of the Kabbalah. It's the crown. That's the same metaphor, same symbol, same poetic reference. It's in Buddhism and it's in Taoism. That concept of being keenly aware and keenly self-aware appears in many cultures. And the most recent culture that I discovered is this one that was featured in this kind of Sherlock Holmes, The Irregulars series. And it was in that one, the term was ipsissimus, but it all means the same thing.
I think we should also hold up not only the awareness part and the books that Barry was holding up earlier, but Sam was also talking about the space in between where, you know, what's the word for that? Sober contemplation, maybe, between idea and action. I don't know. There's probably a good word for that. Sorry.
Planning.
You mean the space where choice is possible?
Yeah.
Yes.
And the calculus of ideas and planning.
You could use whatever word as long as it means that you can create choice and you can intentionally choose.
Right.
And that you become aware of the consequences of each choice.
And feedback control theory and planning and other variations of doing that.
So Barry, may I?
Yes, please.
In what you just said about ipsissimus or whatever that word was, I agree with what you said, except for the use of the word keenly. I don't think that the word keenly is necessary there.
That's sort of the top level. The person who does it better than everybody else on the planet.
Yeah, but why have that notion of better?
If you haven't got a nation, there's a difficulty. If you haven't got,
I gotta go find out why my dogs are barking. I'll be right back.
a tribe, a team is like having a team is having camaraderie with your fellows. It's a fellowship. And if you haven't got a nation and a patriotic sense of duty and honor and respect for that nation, what have you got?
So how was keenly related to better? Like, I missed that. Barry.
In real time, it's somebody who not only sees what everybody else hasn't seen yet, but sees it very quickly and very accurately, where everybody else eventually comes to see it, but slowly and in a kind of a fog-bound manner. So the ipsissimus is the character in the story who sees through all the fog and sees the subtle feature and sees it clearly and accurately and can articulate it, while everybody else is still kind of, you know, lost in the woods.
Yeah, lost in contemplation.
That's, you know, Barry, that's one of the difficulties I had when I was trying to get sober, was accepting the idea that other people knew more than me about this thing, the topic, and letting go of my old notions that were clearly not working, were false. You know, I was a card-carrying atheist, had absolutely no spiritual understanding or concepts worth discussing, and I dropped the notion I just eventually built up enough courage to let go of the idea that I was right about it, and that opened the door to the fact that I could be wrong, and then I could make progress. That's when I started making progress, in fact.
Yeah.
So back to the idea of better. So you got the keenly, and you got the guy who can see keenly through the situation and be able to know what's
Going on.
Yeah, at least be able to understand, has understanding, I guess is what
Insight. It's getting to insight rapidly, accurately, with great precision.
Right. Insight means new understanding.
Yeah. Seeing what's behind the surface, behind the curtain.
Yeah. So, yeah, and I think with Sam's comment about better, that seems to be the fulcrum word in all of my philosophies. Maybe that's no big profound thing, that defining better is the hardest thing to do.
It's like
If
the
we could
Olympics,
do it-
higher, better, faster.
Yeah, if we could define better, we just write it down and hand it to each other, and then there we have it, right?
Gets to the finish line faster, more gracefully, more elegantly, more amazingly than all the other contenders.
The trade-off triangle. The trade-off triangle kind of shows you one conundrum, right? Time, quality, and cost.
Grace, and just the sheer beauty of the athlete.
Who's been watching
that's-
the news feed? The news feed about the new device. It's a microscope. It's a quantum microscope or electron microscope, but it's powered by lasers, and it's something like 800 times more focusing ability than the old one. They say it's going to give scientists an incredible view of how life is structured and how molecules assemble themselves, because they can slow it down to a millionth of a trillionth of a second.
The electron microscope or something better than electron microscope.
Yeah, it's using lasers. They're
Lasers
generating. They're amplifying the microscope with these lasers.
Should post that link in barn raising. That sounds interesting.
Electrons have a shorter wavelength than lasers. They can resolve more detail than lasers can, because lasers are pretty long wavelength compared to the wavelength of an electron.
I'll look in the history of my browser and send you the link. You the link.
Maybe it's an interferometer. I mean, it could be an interferometer. You can use lasers as an interferometer. Then maybe you can do better than electron microscope. But
it costs them a lot of money.
I don't know.
Here's the summary from the website asc.ohio-state.edu. The mass of the electron is m equals 9.1 times 10 minus 31 kilograms. M equals 9.1 times 10 minus 31 kg. From the de Broglie relation, we get a wavelength lambda approximately equals 10 minus 10 meters. Lambda approximately equals 10 minus 10 meters.
Ooh, that was 32 seconds.
Question: how do you find the wavelength of electrons? Do you want to hear it?
Yes.
So
yes.
The Broglie wavelength of electron
On the
is less
website
than the wavelength of
JP, they say wavelength of electron. Wavelength of an electron is calculated for a given energy by using the de Broglie relation between the momentum p and the wavelength lambda of an electron.
That sounds circular to me.
Well, the point is you want to compare it. So take the wavelength of, let's say, blue light, and the Broglie wavelength electron, and see which is smaller and how much.
Yeah. Red, they have different lengths of wavelength. That's actually how the property that we see in our eyes, right? It's the wavelength that makes it a different property.
Right. If you're using your finger to poke something, you can't see any details smaller than the width of your finger. If you use a needle, you can find details that are smaller than the bluntness of a finger, and so on. So you need the smaller the probe, the more detail you can pick out.
Also, with wavelengths of light, a bit of a, I'll say, since we're in the after show, there's some animals that have like 16 cones in their eyes. They can see, like, or I don't know how many cones. They can see 16 million colors.
Yeah, I think
pretty
it's
crazy.
4. I think it's 4 cones, or maybe 5. But
Well, humans, that's what humans have, 3, right?
some
3 or-
humans have 4. That's this.
Oh,
I forget what they're called. Superchromatics. There's
Oh,
a
yeah.
very small percentage of people who have 4, who can see 4 different fundamental wavelengths of light, and superchromatic or some word like that. There's not very many, less than 1%, I think.
and then we're back into synesthesia, right?
Well, that's just mapping it. I mean,
That's a
telling
whole nother thing.
describing a scene in words is synesthesia. It's just transferring an image into a narrative. That's pretty common. Music, to transferring emotions into music. That's, it's just mapping
Well,
from one modality to the next.
it's not impossible to conceive, but it's quite phenomenal.
It's uncommon to be any good at it.
That was a pun. That was a pun. I can't, it's quite phenomenal.
Yeah. Captured by the
Trolley.
senses. The phenomenon is what's captured by the senses, and the noumenon is what's captured by pure thought. You can
So I
see
guess
patterns in pure thought, which you may not see the patterns, with ordinary
It's very
vision.
numinalistic phenomena.
Noumenal and phenomenal.
Numinal phenomenal.
Thought captured by the senses.
I found that clip, so I put it in the chat, and you can fast forward to about 7 or 8 minutes to get
Yeah,
to
but
the.
if you put it in barn raising, it lasts forever. This chat will be okay, but I'll have to go to 3 buttons to watch it. Where if you put it in the chat, it's just at my convenience, waiting as a treat. You see the difference?
Yeah, I'll have to go back to my browser.
Although I could go in the chat right now and load it up into my computer, actually, if I was smart enough. Thank you, Alex.
Wait, I need to meet. How far into the video, Alex?
7.5 minutes. Actually, less than that. You can go back and forwards.
I got it loaded for later now. That sounds interesting. So I haven't heard much from Tees.
To get the exact spot, I'll have to get the exact position, I'll have to watch it again. But I was just having a glimpse, just brushing through it quickly, and I have to try and find the spot. There's quite a bit in there about the new paradigm for science, the new technology that's coming up because of the increase in the computational power of PCs and integrated circuits. It's a phenomenal rate of change we're experiencing at the moment, and it's quite mind-blowing, mind-boggling.
Seven minutes in, it's about building a small fusion reactor. It's not about a microscope. It's about miniaturizing a fusion reactor. Instead of a great big building, it's tabletop size. It's not about microscopes.
Well, there must be a different timestamp. I'll put the correct timestamp in the chat.
Okay.
The future of energy.
Yeah, and the idea is that nuclear reactors are gigantic buildings, huge, that take up an acre, and they want to build a fusion reactor that sits on your tabletop. It's miniaturizing a reactor, which is not a microscope. It's just converting hydrogen to energy without having a gigantic football field size system.
The story about the microscope might be in a different clip entirely, but that's quite a long clip you've got there.
Yeah, I don't know. I just watched about a minute's worth from starting around minute 7, and it's not in there.
I'm glad you checked it out, Barry. I'd been very disappointed to watch that whole thing and not find an electron microscope.
It might be somewhere else in the video, but it's not at minute 7.
We'll have to do a search.
It's laser. It's a laser microscope.
Laser, okay.
But the main
should
thing
probably-
about looking at anything is that you can only see details down to the wavelength of the probe, the physical size of the probe. So if you're using your hand to feel something, you can't feel something that's much smaller than the size of your palm. If you use your finger, you can find things as small as the size of your finger, but nothing smaller, and so on.
Yeah, and the conundrum that nobody knows the size of the Planck time or whatever it's called, the smallest.
Well, we don't have a probe that can measure.
Yeah.
I think we're up to what, I don't know, zeptoseconds or something now, whatever.
There is no absolute truth, right, Barry? Like everything bottoms out. All axioms end in a trilemma, or everything bottoms out, does it not?
In the physical world, now in mathematics, you have a synthetic world, but so you can find absolute truth within the axioms of an axiomatic mathematical system. But in science and physics, you can't, because there is no axiom.
What about Gödel, though? Huh?
That's axiomatic mathematics. He said,
Yeah, doesn't that have a hole in it?
He says
It's an issue.
He says
big-
in axiomatic mathematics, there is a limit to how much you can prove. And that's because part of what you assume is in the axioms. And you don't prove
Exactly.
So the axioms limit what you can prove, but you can, the things that you can prove, you can prove.
As long as you assume the axioms.
Well, as long as you say I'm living within this axiomatic foundation. This is the key thing. This is the key thing in civil government. Civil government adopts as an axiom the rule of law. But the rule of law is a disprovable axiom. That's why the law doesn't work as predicted or anticipated. And what not Gödel, but what's his name? Lorenz discovered, actually Poincaré discovered, is that rule-based systems are mathematically chaotic. And that's an important discovery that was suspected for thousands of years, but never rigorously proven until 20th century mathematics. But the rule of law is based on an axiom which has been disproven. It's chaotic. Not law and order.
That's the human condition. And then some people like to have a religious presupposition to make themselves feel better that they know.
Believe it or not, Colin, it was the theologians who first suspected that there was a fundamental flaw in the rule of law and proposed something different, but they couldn't explain it because they didn't have the language.
Yeah.
They didn't have the mathematical language 3,500 years ago to explain what Poincaré and Lorenz explained in the 20th century.
But was there any credible thinkers who were not sort of quote unquote religious, or have, it was kind of ubiquitous back then, was it not?
Well, it's not a sharp boundary. It's not a sharp boundary between theology and take theomethy. Theomethy is much more rigorous than theology because it's not in words, it's in math. But it's still trying to find out what's the fundamental structure of nature.
Indeed, very, very interesting. And it is the human story, and it has been manipulated.
Well, I mean, people will pay attention to a story, or they won't pay attention to a mathematical presentation because they can't decode a mathematical presentation. So you map it into a story. If you're going to map it into a story, you have to introduce storybook characters. Storybook characters have to manifest whatever it is you're trying to get across. Well, deities are storybook characters. There are also abstractions, which you can do in pure abstract analysis. But if you do that, you've lost 99% of your audience.
Yeah.
All right, so
They're
you
also
have the story, and now you've got storybook characters, including.
No, I agree. Yeah. they were also real at one point in time, or considered real, and still to some people they are.
Well, Mother Nature, we talk about Mother Nature. Everybody knows that Mother Nature is just a trope, just a storybook
Yeah.
trope. But try to get across Mother Nature without using Mother Nature as a poetic metaphor.
I think there might be an exception in a few cultures. Mother
You have
Nature
Old
might
Man
actually.
Winter and Father Time. Everybody
Old
knows
Man Winter and Father Time. Yes, I'll give you those.
just
I'll
you
give
know.
you those. There's Old Man Winter, yeah.
But we talk about Old Man Winter. We don't think that there's actually, some, human-like creature that's running the winter. The winter
Why
season.
wasn't it Snotty Nose Kid Winter?
So, if you want to do a story, you got to make characters, or otherwise you got a story.
Actually, you could do that, couldn't you? You could make a Snotty Nose Kid Winter.
That's what I mean. Look at human literature, including everything on Netflix or whatever streaming channel you use. They tell all these stories where they've got magicians and supernatural characters and whatever. And aliens, and they make up these characters because otherwise you haven't got an audience. Nobody's going to pay $15 a month to tune into Netflix if they're doing theology or abstract theory.
No, that's right. Theology is a good role model for how to entertain people, I think, in some ritualistic way with their music and their songs and their gallantry.
So there you have it. Okay. I don't belittle the notion that if you're going to tell a story, you got to make up a character to be your superhero or whatever. Fine, I get that. Poetry, you do the same thing. They make up metaphors in poetry. Nothing wrong with making up metaphors. It's a useful way of communicating.
As long as it's a germane, and I think artistic people like these kinds of things maybe more than other people. But yeah. I think done well, everybody can appreciate it. And that's the quality of the 30 seconds Alex is talking about.
It's just a feature of humans that we respond to stories much more readily than we respond to analytical theory. You and I might appreciate theory, and Sam might appreciate theory, but a 5-year-old kid, you're talking gibberish to him. E = mc squared. What the hell does that mean? I
think there C is the theology number, right?
It's just a velocity, but you explain velocity to a kid. At some point, it takes a while to explain velocity. Go watch a Calvin and Hobbes, going down on the sled at super speed down the hill, and you can get across velocity, but you have to have Calvin and Hobbes to do that. You have to have the storybook, comic book characters to get across the idea of speed. Do it in mathematics, and nobody's going to buy the comic book because it ain't a comic book.
So I guess the real thing, and it's kind of like what I was talking. Sam says, "Well, let's talk about the tools that we have, not the tools we dream of." But my idea of a heat map of feedback on somebody's share, but also the idea of I'm going to lose my thought thinking of two things at the same time. Calvin and Hobbes' story. Oh, yes, being able to tell a story, but having it dynamic enough that it can be modified. How people, the classic extreme example is they write a lie on the front page and they do a retraction on page 6, like 2 weeks later. Yeah.
Stories have their value, but don't get too caught up in the story. Look at Aesop's Fables. Aesop's Fables got all these animals in it. Well, everybody knows that these animals are just made up characters, but they're getting across morals. You're teaching morals through these children's fables. It's not the animals. It's the animal is the vehicle for introducing a moral. It's about survival.
Okay, bye. Bye. I'm leaving.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Have a good week.
Thank you. Same to you.
What'd you find, Alex?
I found another one.
With the laser microscope?
Yeah, I went to my YouTube history and looked through what the movies I've watched in the last couple of hours. There's about 50.
That's
So
the
is
way
this
to
a
do
very
it.
short one, or is this one where you need an index into a timestamp?
Well, I hope that's the one, because
Oh, you hope.
the only other one was there was military lasers for weapons.
Yeah, military hardware is pretty big, so you don't need a very tiny wavelength to see a giant missile in the sky.
So what do you think of the trolley experiment, Barry? I just recently had a long conversation with a group of people about the trolley experiment.
It's a useful way to think about utilitarianism.
Basically ethics 101, right?
Yeah, I mean, you know, if you go on to Netflix, you'll find several stories where ethics is sort of woven into the storyline, and they use these scenarios, because if you try to do it in the abstract, if you do utilitarianism in the abstract, you've lost probably all of your students. If you do the trolley problem and you create these characters and scenarios, and at least get people to think about the issue. I mean, that's just like a microsystems. Well, that is a microscope. Confocal laser scanning microscope.
There we go.
The evolution of confocal imaging.
Yeah.
With its revolutionary design, the Leica TCS SP8 provides high-performance optics of outstanding transparency and optical throughput. Leica's patented AOBS, acousto-optical beam splitter, allows you to separate.
I was worried about China ordering the people.
Hold on. Acoustic optical beam splitter.
Variety of light sources, from ultraviolet to visible and infrared.
Or take advantage of Leica's proprietary white light laser technology. The 3-mirror scanning system is engineered to maximize imaging precision. Discover the largest field of view, best-in-class flatness of field, and homogeneity of illumination. Switching to resonant imaging at 12 kHz, you can work at more than 420 frames per second.
Mm. 120. It's not that many, really.
Yeah.
A purely optical field rotation system guides the high-speed scanning beam to any angle you need. For example, when imaging nerve cells in a living tissue culture.
Nerve cells are big.
This makes the Leica TCS SP8 the instrument of choice for neurosciences. Leica designed the TCS SP8 to grow with your demands. From imaging to supersensitivity, from confocal to super resolution, from multiphoton to CARS imaging. Adapt and configure wherever your research takes you. Leica's state-of-the-art hybrid detectors are available in both descanned and non-descanned versions. These are ideally suited to multiphoton imaging. The detectors work in synergy with next-generation CS2 objectives to give perfect co-localization and optimized image acquisition of structures deep within tissue sections.
Yeah, tissue, big, compared to the wavelength of light.
Components work in synergy. The AOBS, the white light laser, the spectral detector. With a Leica TCS SP8, your experiment rules the instrument, not the other way round. In Leica's unique spectral detector, a clear glass prism is the dispersive element. This overcomes absorption of any grating setup. Polarization of the fluorescent light is irrelevant for the prism, and throughput of light is maximized at almost 100%. The Leica spectral detector separates the different fluorescent colors of your sample to single photomultipliers, or hybrid detectors. Depending on the intensity of the light, you choose the gain. Treat each fluorophore separately to optimize its representation in the resulting image. True spectral detection ensures true imaging of your samples, without compromise. The new Leica TCS SP8. Looking forward to your discoveries.
That's not the one I was looking at before. The one I was looking at before is in a building about 12 kilometers long.
Yeah.
It's
That was just,
it's got an accelerator in it.
yeah,
That one
this-
was interesting enough.
It was just, but it was an ordinary light. I mean, it's laser light, but it's still a light telescope. So it's not, I got to find that.
That was pretty interesting.
I've lost the window to stop it. Where's the window? Here it is.
So it's interesting with the trolley experiment. The reason we came across it was because one guy was giving his principles of a way to live, like one of the things we were saying, like golden rule, going over that stuff.
Yeah.
And then he says, well, live and let live. And we kind of like that, but without the adjunct of, be your brother's keeper, it didn't make a lot of sense. And then remember that experiment we had with Stacy when we were trying to agree on something?
Right, and we couldn't find anything that we all would agree on.
Well, this is a repeat of that. So then up comes the trolley experiment. And so anyway, we almost succeeded. There's quite a few people in the conversation to look at the principles and try to mold them into something we could all agree about. At least individually, we could turn it into something that the individual agreed on. But we never got there. But the trolley experiment was interesting because that same person, they basically said they would wait so long to decide whether to pull the switch or not, that they would probably fail to pull the switch.
There is a solution to the trolley problem because they made it into an actual problem. And if you know anything about, rail tracks and the fact that a trolley has a front truck and a back truck, if you throw the switch in between the front and the back truck, you derail the trolley. So the timing
on the trolley.
the timing is to throw the switch so that one truck goes this way and the back truck goes the other way, and you derail it and it doesn't hit anybody. That's the problem. No. That's the problem with making up a concrete example.
Yeah,
you can use a concrete example to defeat the purpose of the example.
Well, it's so funny you say that because that's exactly what happens. And you were saying about the idea, and this is why it made me think of it, that you have these parables and
allegories.
Allegories, yes, with animals and stuff. And so the idea is to strip down the problem to its bare essentials so that you just have a decision to make without anything, any extraneous details. And the first thing somebody wants to do is they want to say, well, what if it was the old person on this side of the track and babies on the other side, Right. So that made me think the only way I could get this person to engage was to say, okay, I think I can change it a little bit by saying all the people on the tracks are family members that you love equally. Now we're not going to say who they are or where they are, but there's one on one track and that's where the train, and there's one going towards 5 and that's where the train's going. Would you pull the switch then? He didn't answer if he pulled the switch, but he did offer that it would make a difference.
It comes out of utilitarianism. If you value things differently, then you'll choose the one you value the most. And the thing is that I may value, my sister, and you may value, your daughter. So, the thing is that if you have equal value, then, it's sort of like,
yeah, that's the point. Yeah, that's the point.
It's like Siamese twins. We can separate the Siamese twins, but one of them has to die.
Well, in this case, the conundrum was that he didn't feel a duty towards society enough to think that he was a God enough figure that he could make the decision. And he would think, okay, well, he tried to think it through, ruining the whole experiment in the first place. So in order to pull him out of the ditch, I just added the family element to it. And then it did make a difference to him. But as you know, the corollary to the experiment is, okay, now it's not a switch. Now it's a large person that will stop the train. Will you push him in front of the train? Now that's kind of, they both go together, right?
See, they give you a binary choice and you say, you gave me a binary choice, but I'm going to invent the excluded middle. I'm going to invent a solution that's neither of your two binary options. Why am I stuck with your two binary options? I will invent an innovative solution that you didn't offer me, but still technically exists.
Yeah,
and I think that's where creativity comes from. Creativity is inventing the excluded middle.
Yes, that's a beautiful thing. But at the same time, I think it does well to redirect somebody back to the problem without overthinking it, because the ethical problem is best understood at its simplicity, with maybe just the admit for people who don't care about other people other than their family, their kin, right? Because that makes sense. Like, you're thinking about ethics, and you make different decisions for kin people than you do for average Joe you don't know in some cases. So when it comes to deciding who dies and who wins, you'd be much more apt to have an opinion when it's your kin.
That's again,
I was surprised.
it's similar. It's the point again, is similar value. So you value tools. One thing that took me a year to figure out, even though I've been given this hint for a year, is that one of the things that you value very highly is tools. For you, tools are something very valuable. Okay, that's fine. For me, I also value tools, but maybe not to the same extent. But
I
that
don't know.
doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with tools. They're simply in my structure. They're not the most valuable thing in my world. They're a valuable thing, but not the most valuable thing. Maybe
I would say aids basically, something that would aid you, help you, enhance.
Yeah.
Those are
For
tools.
me, brain power is an aid. Or
Sure.
Art
is a beautiful tool.
Yeah.
Right.
And storytelling is an aid.
Well, that's why philosophy has many branches. That's why philosophy has many branches, not just ethics, but aesthetics and logic, and so it's quite a thing.
So you use what?
So that was a lot of fun. That was a lot of fun going through the trolley experiment and having people who are actively engaged in doing it. You do know that the minefield or Vsauce actually did the experiment that they couldn't do in universities because of legal concerns, and they got some psychologists together and whatever, and they tried to mitigate all the risks, and they went ahead and did that. So if you haven't seen it, I could put that in the barn raising chat. That you could just search for it, Trolley Experiment in real life, if you haven't seen it.
The dilemma, that moral ethical dilemma you mentioned came up in AI studies when you're sleeping and the car is on automatic pilot and it has to swerve to miss an animal, and it could hit another vehicle and wipe out a family. So it has to make a decision, split judgment.
Yep.
I see Sam has his hand up. Did you want to say something, Sam?
No, I think that's a residual.
I just noticed that his hand was up.
I take mine down when I finish.
So if Sam doesn't want to, I can take Sam's hand down for him.
Well, it's been fun, guys. Unless there's anything else you want to discuss, I think I'll get on with my day.
Actually, I don't think I can take his hand down. Oh, yes, I can. Okay, if we're done, then if we're done, then listen, I will end the session on Sam's behalf so that it doesn't keep running.
All righty. See you later, guys.
When I find that link, I will let you know.
Okay.
Yes, sure. Sounds good.
I'm going to save the chat before okay. If you're ready to go, Alex, I'm going to go ahead and see if I can end the meeting, okay?
Yep, I'm ready.
Let's see.
Saved.